It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the former USA track and field heptathlon, Kendall Gustafson. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Brandon?
I'm doing wonderful. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to get onto the professional track and field side as an athlete?
So I don't think it's funny because I think a lot of young kids, they'll tell you when they are very young that they do want to be a professional athlete. And I don't think I ever really was focused on that. I think more so I knew I wanted to go to college and run. But what happened is when I finished college, I knew there was a lot more left in me. And the track and field world is set up where I kind of could continue on my own without having to, sign a deal of any kind or join a team or get drafted or anything like that. And so I knew I kind of put myself in a position where I could, continue to succeed after college. And it just kind of worked out more so than me being like, I want to be a professional athlete. It was like, hey, this is going well. I should probably keep doing this.
How is it like obviously going to Duke and playing in the ACC?
It was good, but I was only there for 2 years and decided to ultimately transfer because I moved across the country and it was a little bit different for me and wasn't quite what I was looking for in a college experience, and found that I just there was more for me, and there was more that I needed to get out of me, and that just wasn't the right environment for me to do it. So I made that decision to transfer from Duke to UCLA, which was for me ultimately an excellent decision.
Of course, what was it like getting to put on that Duke Blue Devils jersey and getting to compete against Carolina and NC State?
It was very fun because that rival runs really deep. And it was still, I grew up, my aunt and uncle lived in North Carolina and work at Duke. And so I kind of grew up a Blue Devil fan. And so it meant a little bit more, obviously, growing up and knowing that rivalry. So it was fun to be a part of that finally, rather than, just watch it on TV or watching the basketball games or anything like that.
How was it like obviously going through the transfer portal to obviously make the decision to go to UCLA?
So at the time that I transferred, the transfer portal didn't exist. So I was more so let the coach know that I, wanted to leave. And so they released me along with my scholarship and basically said, okay, cool, you're on your own. And it was up to me to figure out, where I wanted to be next. And I knew that I wanted to come back home. I grew up in Los Angeles and I knew I wanted to be back on the West Coast. And so I reached out to the coaches at UCLA and they were more than happy to have me. And it was actually, for me, it was a very easy process, and they made it, very smooth. And it helped that, I was in good academic standing and all of that. And what I actually decided to do, this was just my personal preference, was I took UCLA is on the quarter system. So I took a quarter off So I kind of came back home and just took some time to rest and recover, and it made it so that they got me into the school, and everything was fine. But then when I did jump in, it was January. So I started school at UCLA in January, and then immediately started competing during indoor season, which was an interesting transition because I'm meeting all these new people in this new school, and then pairing that with being on the road, missing classes and competing. And so it was a big transition, but I was really happy to be there, and so made the best of it, and it worked out well.
Of course, being from Los Angeles, what was that like, obviously getting to compete in your hometown and go to your hometown school?
It was fun. It was something that coming out of high school, I think I took for granted and didn't really think that was something I would be interested in. But then looking back at it, it was so great to be close to home, to be able to have my family come to all my meets, to be able to have my friends come, to be comfortable and in a familiar place, just made me that much more comfortable on the track and able to focus on what I needed to do, as opposed to all of these new things and all of these new surroundings. And it made me proud. It made me proud to represent the university of my hometown, and the university that a lot of my family went to as well.
What was that feeling like, getting to put on the UCLA jersey and getting to represent your hometown?
It was amazing. I remember the first time, it was actually before I started competing, they literally threw a jersey at me and said, "Hey, try this on, let's see what size you are." And I remember going and putting it on and being like, this is really cool. This feels right. And that's how I felt every time I put it on. It just felt right, and I felt like I was at home.
How's it like, obviously getting to compete in the Pac-12 versus obviously when you were competing in the ACC?
It was different. I thought the Pac-12 was more competitive as a conference. You have USC and Oregon and your Arizona schools, and it's just some traditionally excellent track and field schools. And I found it was a good challenge, but it was very rewarding when you would do well. Not that the ACC is not competitive, it is very competitive, but I think there's a lot more history of track and field in the Pac-12, and it was really fun to then be a part of that.
How's it like, obviously being a part of the junior championship for US?
So that was kind of an unexpected thing for me. I went to the US junior championships right after my senior year of high school, just because I qualified for it. And I had been doing summer track and USATF meets much of my life, but I don't know if I didn't realize that I was at a qualifying meet, but I did realize, but I just hadn't really planned on either making it or going. And then I finished second, and the top two went on to compete. And so that was a really fun experience for me. And I don't think I realized the gravity of it, of like making a US national team and what that really meant. And so then when I went, and it was the whole thing. It was, they took us, it was in Medellin, Colombia. We flew down there, and it was so cool to be a part of it. And I was very much like, this is such a cool experience to be able to, one, be in a different country, two, to be representing my country, and then three, to be able to like compete with all of these international athletes that I'd seen the same people over and over again my whole life competing, and all of a sudden then there are these other spectacular athletes who I'd never seen before, and was like, the whole experience was kind of mind-blowing, but it was extraordinarily fun.
How's that like, obviously getting to compete in the Pan American Games?
It was very cool. Same thing. It was fun to be a part of that US team, because all of a sudden I knew the people in my event very well, because we competed against each other at US championships. But then it gave me an opportunity to get to know people across different events. So we would go, we were all in a hotel together. We would go hang out. We had a team room. We'd go play card games or whatever in between. And so I was able to make a lot of new friends, meet a lot of new people, both on the US team and then on the other teams. I mean, this is Pan American Games is, everybody in the Americas. So there's people, and a lot of people didn't speak English as well. So we're trying to communicate with each other. And it was a really fun experience in that sense. And then competition wise, I had never competed in an international meet before. And so it was a really just kind of good experience for me in figuring out what it was like to compete on that, international stage, as opposed to just the US championships that I had been at before, and felt like I learned a lot from the experience.
What was it like, obviously, getting to represent US in the hepathlon?
I mean, it was wonderful. I mean, it was very fun because I also had a teammate with me there, Kendall Williams, who went on to do amazing things. But it was fun because I'm Kendall and she's Kendall, and so we were the Kendalls doing the heptathlon, and she was also my roommate, and so it was just a really cool time to be able to kind of go through an entire heptathlon with her by my side as like my teammate now. And so we would, stick together, help. We obviously had coaches as well, but we'd have to stick together and kind of help each other get through it. And but that's what every heptathlon is like as well, is it's a long journey. It's not just like so many other events. You're there for a very short period of time. And some, running events, you race once and then are gone, but you get to know that your competitors so well because you spend 2 full days with them. And so that's what happens, is by the end of it, everyone's friends. Even your competitors turn into your friends, as opposed to, just someone that you're racing against. And so it's a very big, that's why the combined events family is really a thing, is because we all know each other so well.
How's it like, obviously, getting to travel to different countries and getting to see the different countries in the world as a professional athlete?
It's very, very cool and very rewarding. I mean, for the junior championships, we went to Medellin, Colombia, which is not probably a country that I would have picked to go on vacation to otherwise, but it afforded me the opportunity to see somewhere like that, which is something I don't think I would have ever seen otherwise. And then later when I made the Thorpe Cup team, we went to Germany. And again, I mean, Germany it afforded me the opportunity to see these countries in a way that no tourist would really see a country. Like I got to like really live in it and be in it, as opposed to like just go and see the main sites. It wasn't like I went there for a different purpose, but it allowed me to kind of be in that culture for a moment and really enjoy that experience.
What was that experience like, getting to compete in the Thor Cup and going to Germany?
I think that was probably the most fun I've ever had in a track meet, because I'll say this, the track meet itself, the competition was not very good for me. It was a really tough meet to travel all the way to Europe and then compete in a heptathlon 3 days later. And it was also the one that in 2019 that I went to, it was very, very late in the season, because that was the same year that the World Championships were in Doha and pushed to like October. So Thorpe Cup was like mid to late September. And it was such a long year of training. Everyone was exhausted. But to get on the plane and go to Germany and meet all these new teammates, and, it was such a good group of people. We were in such a beautiful place. We were in Bernhausen, which is just kind of outside of Stuttgart. And I don't know, it was the most fun I've ever had. And the way that they set up that track meet is so fun. And there were so many people that came out and were cheering us on and clapping for every single event. And it was fun to experience how much the people in Europe appreciate the heptathlon and decathlon and how much knowledge they have about the event. And it just made us feel very appreciated and loved.
Of course, what was that like, obviously getting to go for the world championship and obviously go for the Olympic trial?
So I competed at US championships. I'm trying to think of how four times probably. And so every time that I'm competing there's a world championships or an Olympic trials, there's obviously an Olympic berth on the line. So while I never made a world championship team, I was out there, every year competing for it. And it was fun because, it's always about, who shows up that day and who's having the good meet. And I would say I probably, especially at a US championship, never put together that perfect meet that probably would have sent me on any of those teams, but just having the opportunity to compete for them was really special and very, very fun.
What was that like, obviously getting to train for the Olympic trials in 2021?
It was, 2021 was an interesting year because so the Olympic trials obviously got moved from 2020 to 2021. The multi-events get basically a year and a half. And then in that case, it was like 2 years of a qualifying window. So I had been qualified for the Olympic trials since 2019. So basically it was 2 full years that I was qualified for trials and knew I was going to compete there. And then it was very hard in 2020 to have just the whole thing shut down and have to just kind of be put in this holding pattern, for lack of a better term. But what it allowed for, kind of what I talked about, is that it allowed me to find a new training situation. I moved from LA to Houston and began training at Rice there. It was a very, positive time. I made a coaching transition as well. I learned a lot of things and I was actually growing a lot as an athlete. So things were going very well until April 2021, when unfortunately I was at a meet competing and I tore my ACL throwing the javelin. And ACL is a really awful knee injury. And I knew I was immediately done, not only for the season, but I knew the moment it happened that I was going to end my career with that, because it was actually my 3rd knee surgery. I had torn my ACL in my other knee before, torn my meniscus in my other knee before, and then both on my right knee, and then I did it on my left knee this past time. So my year was going really well and I was really feeling positive until everything just kind of blew up in one moment. And it was difficult because then obviously I didn't get to compete at the Olympic trials because I was in a massive leg brace. But it was helpful for me because I had been training with my boyfriend, Scott Phillip, and he was qualified for the Olympic trials as well in the decathlon. And so what I kind of did the rest of the year was just help him train, help coach him. And I went to the Olympic trials with him still. I was just in my big knee brace and I didn't compete, but I think it was helpful for me mentally and emotionally to be able to kind of finish the season, even though it was through him and not through me competing.
Of course, what was that feeling like, obviously, when you knew that it was time to retire?
It was, every emotion in the book. Obviously sad because I didn't get to end on my terms. It was, something snapped and there it goes all at once. And so in that moment, I was pretty devastated. But then, after let that set in a little bit, there was gratitude for everything that track had done for me and like all of the relationships that I had formed. And then ultimately it was peace of mind, because I knew that over the past 14, 15 years, I had given literally all of myself to the sport of track and field and to my event. And even though I know I could have performed better, I fought a lot of injuries, and I know that there were higher scores out there for me, and I never really, reached my potential, but I knew that I had given everything. And so if I hadn't done that, or if I knew that I, had been holding back or something, I think I would have had a lot of regret, but I don't have any regret. I did everything I could for the sport, and it was great to me at some points. It was very cruel to me at some points, but ultimately I left the sport, or I left the competition zone of sport, just feeling grateful for everything that I had been able to accomplish, rather than all the things that I never was able to accomplish.
How's it like, obviously, getting to meet your fans and have them ask for your autographs and photos of you?
It's fun. I mean, for the most part, it's little kids who honestly probably had no idea who I was. It was just the fact that I was either wearing a USA uniform or just competing at the US championships or something like that. And they knew, even though, and I never thought of myself as, I'm certainly not a household name. Most people probably don't know who I am unless they're really into the sport of track and field. But it was still fun to be able to know that even if they didn't really know exactly who I was, there were still people looking up to me, and people that wanted to be in my shoes at one point, and that I, still was a role model for some young kids who wanted to be in the position that I was in.
What was that feeling like, getting to put on that Team USA jersey and getting to represent Team USA on the biggest stage?
I mean, it's hard to describe. I mean, that's what everybody wants to do, right? You go into the sport of track and field, and, there's not like professional teams. There's not stuff like that. Like, our sport is a little different in that sense. It's not about money, that's for sure. So it's more about getting to the point where you are able to represent your country, and when you're able to do that, no matter what team it is, it's a really special feeling, and you feel very accomplished, because that's one of the things that you set out to do in the sport. But I also felt, a lot of pride, because you put that on, you're like, wait, all of a sudden I'm representing something much, much bigger than myself. Whereas before it's an individual sport, and you're, representing yourself constantly. And then all of a sudden it's a whole country. So it's there's a lot of pride, there's a little bit of pressure, but ultimately it's a very, very special feeling.
Of course, how was it like, obviously, getting to compete alongside some of your teammates, such as Anna Kuntz and Maggie Malone?
It's very fun. And like I said, the sport of track and field, and more specifically the heptathlon and decathlon, you become friends with your competitors because you spend so much time with them. So every single girl that I've ever competed against is literally, we're all friends, I don't have and so it's created this really close family. Some of my very best friends are people who started out as competitors, and we just realized that through competitions over and over again, we realized, hey, we really like each other, we're good friends. And so it's always nice, because you go to a competition, you see that familiar face, and it makes you feel, happy and more relaxed to have someone that you enjoy spending time with. And then going through the heptathlon is also, there's so many ups and downs. You kind of lean on some people. You have a bad event, they're there to support you. They have a bad event, you're there to support them. And then it's also somebody to celebrate with when you have a great event. You go on PR, and it's fun to have someone that is genuinely excited for you, rather than in the individual events. I know they also have their families, and they know each other, but there's really nothing like the multi events when it comes to that family aspect.
What are some of your favorite memories and moments while competing with Team USA?
Ooh, the Thorpe Cup as a whole is was so fun. I think, the women won the Thorpe Cup that year. So just, taking those victory laps with my teammates were so fun. And then also, on a more personal level, I say I met my boyfriend, Scott, when we were competing at the Thorpe Cup in 2019. And so not that anything like happened like in that moment, it was just like we met, but it was something like literally that opportunity of competing on Team USA allowed us to meet and kind of, build our relationship from there and kind of start the rest of our lives together. And so it's literally, I owe our entire relationship to making a US national team. And it is fun when people ask, how did you do meet? And go, yeah, we were on a US national team in Germany together. And it's kind of people go, what? What do you mean? So, it's kind of a fun way, and probably, obviously the biggest lasting effect that track and field has had on me is my relationship.
Of course, who are some of the people that you look up to in the sport of track and field?
Oh man. I'll say when I first started, I remember when I was a little girl, this is one of the best heptathletes in the world at the time was a Swedish athlete named Carolina Klüft. And I'm American. I have Swedish heritage, and I was like, oh, look, this blonde girl who kind of looks like me out here crushing the heptathlon. And she was definitely a big role model for me. And then as I got a little older, when I first got to UCLA, one of our volunteer assistant coaches was Sharon Day Monroe, who was at the time one of the best heptathletes in the US. And she literally became my training partner. And it was so crazy to me that I was like, oh, wow, okay, I'm just kind of stepping into this. I don't feel like I deserve to have her around. Yet she did so much for me, either, daily. She would literally help coach me. She was one of our volunteer assistants. And so she did a lot for me in that sense, but just watching her compete and learning a lot from being around her and how she carried herself was really cool. And she's still a friend now. And then, it's funny because there's so many coaches as well that have helped me learn a lot. But one of my favorites, and I'm not just saying this now, is my current boss, Coach John Frazier, who was the throws coach at UCLA. And from the moment I met him, I knew he was an incredible coach, and he worked so well with me as an athlete. He was my throws coach while I was at UCLA. Then I worked with him when I was a volunteer. And I just love the way that he coached his athletes. And I love the way that he, got them all worked up and excited, yet was so, stern with them and, just got the results constantly. And I felt like I learned so much from him. And that's why I think it was a little bit fate when he called me to come work for him at Texas State. Because I tell people there's about 3 people I would have picked my life up and moved for. And he was one of them, and he happened to give me a call. And so that's what I did.
Of course, how was the transition like from going from professional athlete to obviously getting into where you are now as a college coach?
I think it was a generally easy transition because for me, my career ended on an injury, right? So I didn't really have when I finished track, I wasn't really in a physical state to keep going. My body said, no, we're done. And I think for some people it might be hard because they feel really good still. And they're like, why am I not doing this? I felt awful. Like my knee didn't work. I was recovering from surgery. And so my mind was still there and I still wanted to be involved. And so that's what coaching allowed me to do as I really slowly recovered from my knee surgery. And it allowed me to, still be involved and kind of live vicariously through my athletes and still get the, adrenaline rush and everything that came with that, but without having to put my body through it, which was the problem for me before, was that my body didn't want to do it anymore. So for me, it was it was a good transition to make without just ripping myself away from the sport of track and field. I'm obviously still very heavily involved. Just not me. I'm not the one competing anymore. Now I'm just coaching others.
Of course, what advice would you give those college athletes that are looking to represent Team USA?
I would say one of the main things is keep going and keep showing up. Like I said before, if you can get yourself to the US national championship meet, everyone, obviously there's some people that are better than others, but everyone there has the same opportunity, right? So, and it's all about who happens to have a good day at the US championship meet. So if you can get yourself to that meet over and over and over again, keep going and keep showing up, and you never know what's going to happen.
What advice would you give those professional athletes that are looking to represent their country, whether it's US or Canada, in professional track and field?
Well, obviously the one that I have experience with is in the US, which is, people joke, but it's not really a joke that it's the hardest team to make. And from my understanding, a lot of other countries don't have the same kind of not standards, but procedures when it comes to picking athletes to make their team. A lot of the times they'll just go down a list and pick people. And so it's more so about, getting the competitions in and making sure you're hitting specific marks. Whereas in the US, it's about going to the national championship meet and performing well at that meet. So it's kind of different routes that people will take depending on what country they're trying to represent. I know for Canada, people sometimes don't even need to show up to their national meet in order to make their national team. And to me, that's a little bit foreign, literally, but it, I think what that allows is that for people who are at the highest level, then they don't need to peak for a national championship meet, and they can go wait and peak at world championships or Olympics. Which makes sense for those countries. But for the US, we just have so much depth that we have to have some kind of national championship or Olympic trials meet in order to, pick our best three to represent at the world level.
What advice would you give those professional athletes that are looking to transition from being professional athletes to getting into the corporate world or even coaching world like you did?
It's all about relationships and what type of person you are, as opposed to anything else. And so I think my best piece of advice is, one, be a good person, and allow people to see what type of person you are, as opposed to just, what type of athlete you are. Because when you're coaching, there are some really good athletes that are probably not very good coaches, and vice versa, right? There's some really good coaches that were not good athletes themselves. It's not the same thing. And coaching is much more about the type of person you are, how you represent yourself, how you communicate with others, etc. So it's about practicing people skills, and then practice, and making sure you just have as many connections and relationships as possible, because you never know where each of those are going to lead.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
So I have a couple different things. I have Coach K Texas State, which is my coaching Instagram and Twitter. And then I also have a personal Instagram, which is Kendall Gus. And that's just me, and that's kind of where I posted more of like my personal track and field journey, and that's just me now. But I keep those separate, and I like to keep them separate because, I feel like they are two different sides of me.
Thank you again, Kendall Gus, for your interview, and best luck in your future.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Kendall Gus, for your interview, and best luck in your future.
Thank you.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.